Hachiko Waits, Chapter 3. Professor Ueno packed up his books and left his classroom in a hurry. He was so distracted by thoughts of Hachi, he almost collided with a delivery boy on a bicycle, who was balancing a round tray stacked high with lunch boxes and rice bowls above his shoulder. "Excuse me." The professor lowered his head in apology as the delivery boy swerved out of his way. Hoping Hachi had not caused the station master any trouble, the professor hurried along to board the train that would take him from the university back to Shibuya Station. Mr. Yoshikawa looked up at the big round clock hanging from the ceiling in the center of the train station. It was almost 3 o'clock. Soon, Professor Ueno would arrive, and the station master would have to tell him what had happened. The professor had trusted him to take care of his dog, and he had not done his job. All day long he had asked people waiting for their trains if they had seen Hachi. "He is a young, golden-brown Akita-ken with a white patch of fur on his face," the station master said over and over. Every hour or so, Mr. Yoshikawa went down to ask the food vendors if they had noticed Hachi sniffing around their booths in search of a snack. He bought a bowl of udon from a vendor, quickly gobbled down the wide noodles, and then spent the better part of his noontime break searching the neighborhood for Hachi. But he had not been able to find him. At 5 minutes before 3 o'clock, Mr. Yoshikawa walked out onto the platform and pulled at the tip of his red-brimmed hat. He looked to his right, the direction from which the train would arrive. There was no sign of it yet. Mr. Yoshikawa turned and looked to his left. He blinked once, then shook his head and blinked again, because he could not believe what he saw. A golden-brown Akita-ken. The station master rushed over to the dog. "Hachi?" he asked. The dog thumped his tail once at the sound of his name. "Where have you been?" Mr. Yoshikawa asked, rubbing the dog's neck and shoulders. "I have been worried about you." Hachi stared into his eyes, mute. "Well, never mind," Mr. Yoshikawa said, giving Hachi a pat on the head. "I am very happy that you are here." And just as the words left his mouth, the train entered the station and ground to a halt. Professor Ueno was the first one to step off. "Hello, little friend," he called, his voice full of happiness. Hachi ran to his master, licked each of his fingers, and then spun in circles before him. Yasuo and his mother followed the professor off the train. "Look, Oka-san," Yasuo laughed. "The professor's dog is making himself dizzy." "He is dizzy with joy," said Mrs. Takahashi with a smile. When Hachi stopped spinning, Yasuo called, "Here, Hachi," and held out his hand. The dog looked at the boy and wagged his tail, but he stayed at the side of his master. "Thank you so much for watching him," the professor said to the station master. "It was very kind of you to do me the favor." "You are very welcome," said Mr. Yoshikawa. "Was Hachi any trouble?" Professor Ueno asked. Mr. Yoshikawa looked at the dog and lifted his eyebrows. Hachi looked back at him with his mouth slightly open and his pink tongue hanging out, almost as though he were laughing. "I do not know if he was trouble," the station master said. "Hachi left the station a few minutes after your train pulled away from the platform. I tried to catch him, but he ran too fast. I asked many people and searched for him during my lunch hour, but I could not find him. And then, out of nowhere," Mr. Yoshikawa gestured toward the train station's entrance. He returned just before 3 o'clock. It is as though he knew when you would arrive." The professor looked down at Hachi and beamed. Dogs could not tell time. Or could they? "That is most interesting," he said to the station master. "I am sorry he caused you so much trouble." "There is no need to apologize," said Mr. Yoshikawa, "because the story has a happy ending." "I thank you again," said the professor, bowing his head. Then he turned to Hachi. "I always knew you were smart," he said. "Now I know you are even smarter than I thought. Little friend, you are the smartest dog in all of Japan."